We're going to go over the best way that you can do cardio while building muscle, and we're going to start right now. Okay, so when we're looking at cardio and how we can actually build muscle and do cardio, the first thing that I want to do is just talk about why. Okay, so I was a strength athlete. I was a power athlete. I was a shot putter at Penn State. I've coached Olympic athletes at the last two Olympics who tend to be all power-based sports. Okay, they're going to be Olympic weightlifters, they're shot putters, they're discus throwers. I have worked with swimmers. I have worked with decathletes. I have worked with athletes that have cardio in their training. But what we want to look at is, why would a power athlete, or why would somebody who's getting into bodybuilding want to do cardio? Initially, my gut reaction is I wanted to go over a research paper, and we're going to look at cardiovascular fitness, body mass index, and mortality, a systematic review and meta-analysis. So we're going to look at what cardio can do for longevity, for health. Okay, and this is something that I've sort of taken seriously as I've run 2 marathons, and I want to go through a little bit of that. But then talking through even further, if we're going to start to use cardio-based training and we still want to gain as much muscle mass as possible, which types of cardio should we be doing? So we're going to go through, we're going to lay out that cardio types, and then we're going to look at how can we set up a day, how can we set up a week, and then which ones really have a high impact on our recovery so that they in turn could, in theory, have a negative impact on our muscle building, and then which ones might actually be a little bit less impactful. So initially, if we're looking at this paper, Cardiovascular Fitness, what does it mean in regards to health? Okay, we know that if you have more muscle mass, you tend to be healthier. We know that if you have more lean muscle mass, if you have more if you have, even in this case, a lower body mass index, and I can't wait for everybody to comment down below that they have a high BMI, but they're really lean, which is fine. But in regards to a general population, BMI is a decent measure. Okay, we can see that those with greater cardiovascular fitness tend to live longer. Okay, but we also know, going back to this, that if you have more muscle mass, you're going to be healthier. It's an organ that just, plays a pivotal role in health. Muscle is. Okay, at least people are starting to view it as an organ now, because it can trigger release of myokines and things like that. So people are also probably triggered by that statement. Now, the purpose of this review was to assess the joint relationship of cardiovascular fitness and body mass index on cardiovascular disease. So we're going to be looking at this quick aspect. And genuinely, I think if we can even look at this as, if you have a higher VO2 max, does this mean that you're going to live longer? Okay, so this was a systematic review, meta-analysis, meaning they're looking at a whole bunch of different studies. They're using a specific design. They're looking through maximum likelihood estimation random effects model with robust variance estimation. So the reference group was normal and was compared with a normal group, weight unfit and overweight unfit and fit. Okay, and obese, unfit, and fit. So they're looking at heavier people who are in decent cardiovascular shape versus heavier people who aren't in decent cardiovascular shape. Overweight in cardiovascular shape, overweight not in cardiovascular shape, and even normal body weight individuals in cardiovascular shape, normal not cardiovascular shape. So they're looking at all of these different studies, and they had to meet these specific criteria. So they were published between 1980 and 2023. Okay, so that's a big pool that they're going to be looking at. They're assessing maximal or VO2 max peak exercise tests. BMI is reported and directly measured. And then there's a joint impact of CRF and BMI on all-cause mortality, CRF being cardiovascular respiratory fitness. Okay, so cardiorespiratory fitness and BMI on all-cause mortality or cardiovascular disease mortality analyzed. Okay, so the reference group was normal weight fit individuals. So 20 articles were included in the analysis, resulting in a total of 398,000 observations. Compared with the reference group, overweight fit. Okay, so somebody who's a little bit heavy, but they're in decent shape. All cause HR and obese fit, all cause did not have a statistically different risk of mortality. Normal weight unfit, all cause, and overweight unfit, all cause, and obese unfit, all cause demonstrated 2 to 3 fold greater mortality risks. Okay, so let's just go back over this. Overweight unfit, obese unfit, and normal weight unfit. All three of them, 2 to 3 greater mortality risks. So you can even just look at that and say, okay, well, if I am normal body weight, but I'm not fit, I don't have any fitness, I'm not lifting, I'm not doing cardiovascular training, I'm not doing shit regarding my health, you still have a 2 to 3-fold greater mortality risk. That's crazy. So cardiorespiratory fitness is a strong predictor of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality, and this attenuates risks associated with being overweight and obesity. So if you're looking at that and you're going, so when the reference group overweight and fit and obese and fit did not have a statistically different risk of mortality compared with the reference group. Okay. And the reference group was normal weight fit individuals. That was the reference group. So in essence, these people who were overweight but had some sense of fitness, and these people that were even to a point husky but had some sense of fitness, did not have a statistically different risk of mortality because they were still fit. They had cardiorespiratory fitness. So cardiorespiratory fitness is a strong predictor of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality. If you don't have it, you better get it. Okay, so now, what does this have to do with building muscle? And this is where we got to start to think about this. This is a paper, they're looking a meta-analysis from stuff all the way up through 2023. So this is some recent stuff, right? And we've got to take this then and say, if we're somebody who's trying to get into fitness and we're someone who wants to gain more muscle because we've been watching all the Peter Attia videos, we've been watching all these other influencers talk about muscle mass has a very strong indication of health. Well, then we also want at the same time to factor in, okay, we got to bring in this cardiorespiratory fitness. So then the question becomes, how can we build muscle mass and still do endurance-based training? Okay, so the first thing that I want to look at then is like, okay, if we take a step back, we can go, I want to increase my VO2 max. Okay, I probably want to use cardiorespiratory training to increase my ability to burn calories, or actually use it to burn calories. So if I can use that then to theoretically get into a caloric deficit. And maybe you're watching and you've seen in the past, we've done videos on even doing low intensity endurance training to help with recovery. Okay, so that's some things that we might look at. Cardiorespiratory fitness training, increase our VO2 max, burn calories, possibly increase recovery. Next thing, what are the 3 types of adaptations that would occur from doing cardiovascular based training, cardiorespiratory, increasing that cardiorespiratory fitness? The first big thing is that we've got to look at, we're probably going to increase our total blood volume. Okay, that's going to be one big adaptation. The second big adaptation is our cardiac output will increase. So every time our heart beats, we will have greater cardiac output, so we can actually pump more blood at one given point. Okay, and the third big adaptation that cardiorespiratory fitness does when we're training this way is that we will see mitochondrial density and efficiency improve. Okay, so that increases our ability to utilize oxygen, which is where we see as one of the roles, that's where we see that increase in VO2 max. Okay, so now we're looking at, those are the 3 big adaptations to cardiovascular training. Total blood volume, cardiac output increases, and then mitochondrial density and efficiency improves. Okay, so then we can go back and now we can look at, if those are the 3 adaptations, what methods are we going to use to actually use for cardiorespiratory fitness? Okay, and then what I want to do is I want to take these methods and then piece them into some type of strength training program. This is what we do inside of our strength training at Peak Strength. Inside of Peak Strength, we have a program where you can actually select a goal of increasing your athletic fitness, increasing your athletic muscle. Okay, so inside the athletic fitness program, you can click on Elite. You can go and say, I want to improve my endurance. I want to improve my strength. I want to still be athletic. And inside of Peak Strength, you can select the athletic fitness portion, click on Elite if you've been around for a long time, okay? And you'll see in this program that we have fitness-based metrics that we use to improve your overall capacity, and you'll have a periodized program that will focus on endurance-based training. It will focus on strength-based training, and it focuses on athletic-based work so that you can improve and jive everything together. So click the link down below. That's going to take you over to Peak Strength, or you can head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. You can download Peak Strength and then get into that program right now. If we're looking at this, the specific types, right? We went over the adaptations. If we're looking at total blood volume improving, typically I like to look at total blood volume will typically be done with long, slow distance work. Okay, so this is anything usually over 60 minutes, 60 plus minutes. Now, if you follow someone like Dr. Steven Seiler, he'll talk about doing endurance-based training for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time. I'm not saying that. Okay, I'm saying that if we can get close to 60 minutes and still do resistance-based training, you're going to see a positive impact in your VO2 max, and I think you would still see a positive impact in your cardiorespiratory fitness. So, long, slow distance. Let's start off with what would be something that could be impactful for long, slow distance. Let's say the easiest level, okay, we're going to go for a walk. Okay, so walking can be viewed, if it's at a brisk pace, as long, slow distance. Your heart rate will get elevated. Now, I think over time, we would like to see your heart rate creep up over probably around 120 beats per minute to really see some adaptations come in regards to cardiorespiratory fitness. But also just going for a walk will increase your caloric burn. Now, most research will also show that you tend to just eat right after you go for a walk and that you'll just replace those calories. So we have to be aware of that. But let's look at walking as one form, one type of increasing the total blood volume. Okay, another type, let's say long distance running. We're going for a long distance run, okay, and we're going to do this for 60 plus minutes. Okay, at a steady pace, long, slow distance. So we have long distance running. Let's say we get on the rower. Okay, so we have a rower in the gym. We get on the rower. We hold our heart rate at 130, 140 beats per minute. We do that for 60 plus minutes. Okay, that's another form. We could get on the assault bike and do something similar. 100 for 60 minutes. That's long, slow distance. Okay, so now we're seeing what those adaptations look like. Those are specific forms of endurance-based work that will have an impact on long, slow distance or on total blood volume. Now, if we're looking at cardiac output, when we're looking at cardiac output, we might see doing something like a treadmill run for 4 minutes at a specific pace. Okay, if we are trying to increase cardiac output, we might do a swimming lap where we swim at 90% of our best time, and then we rest for a minute, and then we swim a lap at 90% of our best time, and then we rest for a minute, and we would do that for, let's say, 15 laps, something along those lines. That would increase our cardiac output over a long time frame. Okay, if we would do some type of Metcon, I would say that's where we would start to see improvements in cardiac output, possibly improvements in mitochondrial density and efficiency, if we're trying to focus on high levels of Metcon work, like kettlebell swings into box jumps, into a rower, into a farmer's carry. Our heart rate can go up and down over those prolonged periods. And then if we could rest for 2 to 5 minutes and then do that again, that's some type of interval work. Okay, so typically, if we look at it in the simplest form for bodybuilders or for individuals out there who are trying to improve muscle mass and cardio, if we would just look at it as long, slow distance can improve, okay, total blood volume, okay, interval work and threshold work at specific paces. So think about swimming, think about running hill sprints, think about Metcons, think about assault bike Tabatas. That's where we'll see cardiac output, and that's where we will typically see mitochondrial density and efficiency improve. Mitochondrial density and efficiency will also improve from LSD work, but I think there's an argument to be made that the more intense cardio will actually do it faster. Okay, so let's just pretend that that's the argument. Now, the biggest thing that we have to think about when we're having an impact on building muscle is that let's establish that we want to resistance-based train 4 days a week. Okay, so we're going to resistance-based train for 4 days a week. And let's just make it the simplest split, a Lulu split. So let's do a lower body, an upper body, a day off, a lower body, and an upper body. Okay, so now we have 4 days. So let's say Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay, that's our Lulu split, lower body, upper body, lower body, upper body. Okay, so now we're going resistance-based training 4 days a week. That's how we want to build muscle mass. And then now we're going to look at this and say, okay, if we're solely focused on building muscle mass and we've got like 20% of us or 20% of our body or our mind has this commitment to cardiorespiratory fitness, we've read this systematic review, we understand that it has a positive impact on our all-cause mortality risk. We want to try and make sure that our heart stays healthy. We can increase that muscle mass. We can maintain cardiovascular fitness. And then over a long time, we'll still build muscle. Okay. So if I'm looking at this, right, and I'm saying, all right, so what the basic thing that we now have to do is what endurance workouts or what endurance activities will have the most negative impact on our overall muscle building. Okay, so my initial response is that if we're looking at that and we're saying, if we're doing a specific cardiovascular exercise for cardiovascular purposes, we don't want the cardiovascular purpose to negatively impact resistance-based training. Right off the bat, the first instinct that I have is that Metcons, which are done at high paces and they are done with heavier loads consistently. So let's say you're swinging a kettlebell that's 100 pounds. Let's say you're doing a dumbbell snatch with a 60-pound dumbbell. Let's say that you're pushing a sled that's 225 pounds, and then you're going on the rower for 30 seconds at as a very high pace, and then you're jumping rope for 30 seconds, and then you're resting for 2 minutes, and then you're repeating that 4 times. That would be what I would consider a Metcon. That's a great cardiovascular workout. However, the movements of, let's say you're doing weighted walking lunges in there as well, and then you're doing the sleds, and then you're doing jumping rope, that can lead to some type of soreness. Okay, that can then lead to having a negative impact on a squat workout. That can then lead to having a negative impact on a bench press workout. That can fatigue your shoulders. That can fatigue your back. Maybe you want to increase muscle mass by doing deadlifts. So the issue that I see right away is that when we're doing Metcon-based training, I see it immediately scoring as a D. If I had an S tier, I'm rating this as a D level. Okay, I'm rating this as like, it's not going to be that good. Now, the one thing I know that people are going to bring up is that a lot of CrossFitters are extraordinarily muscular and they do a lot of Metcon work, and that is 100% fair. A lot of CrossFitters who also are at the professional level do a ton of long, slow distance work. So my argument here would be we don't have as much time as professional CrossFitters or high rocks athletes. And I would actually tend to say that if we're just general athletes that are, let's say, weekend warrior types, we should probably avoid Metcons. We should probably look at it and be like, maybe once a month we can do a Metcon with your bros. You're wearing your high socks, you got your tats, you got your short shorts on and your headband, and you're smashing a Metcon once a month. And what would be fun about this is that you could actually set up a Metcon. You could test it once a month. It's a specific type, a predetermined Metcon that you test once a month. And you're doing your resistance-based training and you're doing the other cardio that we're about to talk about. And then you revisit this Metcon once a month and you see if you're making improvements or not. That would be a very interesting test, because what I would tend to do is I would remove Metcons. Okay, so now let's get to the next one. I want to look at jogging, going for a nice jog. I'm going to bring this up in two different lights. Full disclosure, I'm a big jogging proponent. I have been running about 30 miles a week for the last 2+ years. One thing, if you're trying to increase muscle mass, wear big shoes. Do not listen to people who are like, hey, go get your barefoot shoes. Hey, go run in your minimal shoes. If you're trying to increase muscle mass, you're probably over 180 to 200 pounds. If I'm running at 230 pounds at 30 miles a week, I need shoes with a big sole. I need the old man Hokas. I need the old man Sauconys. I need those. You have to have them. That's going to make it easier for you to lift afterwards. Okay, so that's the next thing that we need to think through is make sure you're getting decent shoes. Now, with jogging, one thing that I have noticed is that people who tend to jog a lot will lose a lot of mobility. If we're losing mobility, we tend to lose some range of motion if we're not doing full range of motion training. This can inhibit on muscular gains. Okay, this is where I will bring up one aspect that I do really like about a treadmill is that we can set a tempo on a treadmill. Let's say we run 10-minute miles on a treadmill. One, we have this predetermined pace that keeps our heart rate very low. Okay, so if I go run on a treadmill at 10 minutes per mile, I know my heart rate won't go above 125. I know I can go on there for 60 minutes and I won't go above 125. And I also know that the actual support of good treadmills, my knees won't hurt, my hips won't hurt, my ankles won't hurt. So that's a big positive aspect. Now, the cool part about running outside, going for a jog outside, is that you're outside. The way that I rank jogging in general is I would put it C on the tier list, because now I'm looking at this and I'm saying the downfall of jogging is that if you do it for 60 minutes, it can be tough. It can be mentally grueling. It also takes 60 minutes. It also can be a challenge. It can be really, really fun and rewarding. But if you've got shorter legs, it would be hard. One benefit for myself is I'm taller. I have longer legs. It's a lot easier for me to go out and run. Somebody who's 5'6" and 200 pounds and they're super swolled up, it's a lot harder for you to run. You're not built to run. So that's where it would end up being a C list, because it can be pretty hard on the body. It can take quite a bit of energy, and it can take quite a bit of time. Now, I would also bring in here on the C list, I would look at something like a ski erg or even going hiking. Okay. I have had multiple athletes roll ankles hiking. I've had multiple athletes complain that their backs and their quads are sore from hiking. And another issue with something like the ski erg that I've heard is I have athletes that'll say they get really dizzy. I'll have athletes that their lats, their triceps, and their forearms also get really fatigued from the ski erg. So in the case of hiking and using a ski erg, I would also place that on the C level of the tier list, because now I'm looking at it going, look, hiking's probably better if you have a wrestler, if you have someone that is more of an endurance-based athlete. But if you're a bigger person, a power-based athlete, a shot putter, a discus thrower, a weightlifter, a power lifter, hiking can actually be sort of freaking hard. Going on the ski erg can also be sort of freaking hard, and you're going to be sore. And if you're looking at jogging and you're looking at the ski erg and you're looking at hiking, these are three areas where you'll start to have some negative impact with soreness. So I would say that there are things that you can do more frequently than a Metcon and still build muscle, but we've just got to be aware of how we would put them into the week. And we will get into that later after we cover the rest of these modalities of endurance-based training. Okay, so jogging, ski ergs, hiking, those are good ways to improve your endurance. But if you really want to dial in muscle mass, I think that there's a couple better methods that you can use. Now, the next two that I want to talk about, okay, one area that I really, really like would be, that I'm bullish on, would be running hill sprints. Full disclosure, hill sprints, if you go in and right away you start to run as hard as possible, you could have a pulled hamstring. You can get really, really sore Achilles. You can get really sore calves. You get really sore in the hamstrings as well. What I like to think about in regards to sprints, okay, if I'm running a 60-meter hill sprint, I want to start once a week, and I want to start at like 60 to 70%. And so we're going to go easy, just building into that, okay? And then over time, we can get to 8 sprints and then 10 sprints. And then we can start to increase the intensity. And then we can start to decrease the rest period. And then we can turn this into a unique form of an interval. So we can sprint up, jog down backwards, rest for a minute. Okay, so now we're going through this and we have a little bit more of an interval-based capacity. We're running up a hill. Okay, so you're going to get, your heart rate's going to skyrocket. I think this is where we will see cardiac output, mitochondrial density, and efficiency both of these aspects will improve dramatically. Okay, but the downfall, we've got to be aware of the soreness. So we've got to ease into this as much as possible. I also think that athletes that tend to do sprints, okay, again, if you're built to actually run, you've got longer legs, it actually can be phenomenal for dicing you up, for getting lean. Okay, so I really, really think it's an effective use of your time as well, because you can keep it between like 20 and 35 minutes. That's typically where we would see these sprint workouts fall in line. Because of that, I'm putting it on the B list. Okay, so it's going to be B tier. So if we're looking at the next thing, I'm going to bring one up that a lot of people are going to be upset about. And there's a reason why you're going to be upset. Okay, swimming. Okay, now a lot of people are absolutely horrific at swimming. If you grew up and you just learned how to swim and that was it, swimming would be a D list. Okay, it'd be a D tier. You would be D tiering all of your swimming. So that's a caveat that I'm going to throw in here. If you grew up and you didn't swim for more than a year on a swim team, you are 100% looking at as D tier. Don't do it. Another caveat. If you're 5'7" with short arms, swimming's not for you. It's going to slaughter you. Okay. You're going to go in and swim. And then in the next 3 days, you're not going to be able to bench. You're not going to be able to do your pull-ups. You're going to be too sore. You're going to be beat up. Okay. You're going to be fatigued. If you've got longer arms or you have swam for a decent amount when you were younger. Okay. So a lot of people who have swam in the past, I'm actually thinking right now, Joe Thomas, who's a Hall of Fame football player, grew up swimming frequently. He then, when he retired from football, ended up winning like the Masters National Championship in, I think, butterfly. Someone like that who's huge doesn't see swimming as a crazy challenge. Now, the reason why I'm so bullish on swimming is because I like cyclical movements, and I like cyclical movements that have minimal negative impact on the body, meaning there's not as much ground reaction from the ground. Okay, when you're in the water, it's really easy on your body. Yes, your shoulders might take a beating over time, but as long as we're being aware of this, swimmers that have advanced skill in swimming, okay, that have a history of swimming, if they're trying to increase muscle mass, you can balance it really, really well. And another cool aspect of it is that you will burn a ton of calories in a short time frame, especially if once a week you go, 60 minutes of just a swim. You're trying to get to a certain metric point, a certain amount of yardage, and then once a week you do some type of interval work. Okay, you can do swimming twice a week, and your cardio will drastically improve. You'll burn a lot of calories, and if you time it properly throughout the week, you'll be really successful. But if you don't have a swimming background, don't do it. It's D tier. If you do it. It's B tier. Okay, so we can figure that out. A tier. I want to get into the A tier. This is where I start to get into looking at something like benefiting or utilizing something like an assault bike, a fan bike. Everybody loves the Echo bike, the assault bike. They're very, very challenging exercises. We did a video where we actually looked at our shot putters, and these are guys that are 300, 320 pounds. Okay, and we spent 12 weeks doing long, slow distance on the assault bike twice a week. So they got to the point where when they were measuring their heart rate, when we were starting off, their heart rate would be at 160 when they were doing like 45 RPMs. By the time we were done, they could hold 50 to 55 RPMs and their heart rate would stay around 120. During that time, their squats blew up. Their bench presses blew up. We even had one guy bench 500 pounds while they were doing this. Okay, so we saw directly that by doing an assault bike, a low intensity cyclical movement for a long period of time, that actually had a positive impact, in the sense that it wasn't, I believe it was helping positively improve their recovery. But one thing here, we kept the heart rate around 125. Once you get past 140, that's when, if you're on the assault bike, you might see potentially a negative impact the next day. The one thing I also want to bring up around the assault bike is that if you're someone who's into athletic fitness and you're trying to improve your athletic fitness, you want to build muscle and cardio and be an athlete, okay, the weekend warrior. The best part about the assault bike is it doesn't really beat you up that much, in the sense that you could squat the next day. When you first do it, it's going to be hard, but after a while you realize, like, there's not as much banging on the knees, okay? Your upper body might get sore if you do really high intense, let's say Tabatas, or let's say the Ronstadt protocol, something like that. That can beat you up a little bit, but you're also going to see a huge spike in your VO2 max, like, immediately when you start doing interval work on the assault bike. Now, again, we need to make sure that we're balancing things throughout the week accordingly, so that it doesn't have a negative impact on your resistance-based training, because that's the main priority here. Okay, so I'm bullish on the assault bike. Okay, I'm also a big proponent. If somebody says, I want to get into endurance cycling, the downfall of something like endurance cycling, cost. It's expensive to riding. Riding a bike is actually extraordinarily expensive. Buying the bike, buying the gear, making sure you look like a fat Lance Armstrong, all those things can be very expensive. And it's also one of those sports that everybody just gets into and they're all in, right? So that's one thing that I will bring up, is that we've got to be aware that it can be very expensive. Now, the best part about endurance cycling is that endurance cycling doesn't bang the body up at all. It can have a negative impact on your taint. It can also have a negative impact on your lower back. It can also have some sense, in some cases, you might have a little bit of calf or quad issues here and there. But I will say, one thing I'll bring up is some of the strongest athletes that I work with, somebody like Hugo Barrett, who is literally one of the strongest athletes I train, he rides a lot. Okay, he's a sprint cyclist who also gets a lot of volume doing endurance cycling. And he has incredible strength. He can power snatch 120, 115 kilos. He can back squat 250 kilos for reps. So we've seen, if you're a skilled rider, that cycling, it can have a positive impact on your training, and you can still gain a ton of muscle mass, literally a ton of muscle mass. So the other aspect that I like about endurance cycling is, like, let's say you want to go out in the morning for an hour ride or an hour and a half. It can be hard at some points, then you can recover very easily. Hard at another point at a hill, back off. Hard at another point at a hill, back off. It can be a very easy up and down workout that doesn't beat you up. So it is something that I am very, very positive on when we're trying to increase that cardiorespiratory output. Now, another thing that I want to get into. So we've talked about the Metcons, we talked about swimming, ski erg, the assault bike, endurance cycling. I want to bring up as a sidebar rowing. One thing here with rowing is that if we get a heart rate monitor on, and I want to go in and I want to do even something like a 500 meter row at, let's just say, something like moderately fast, a minute 50. Okay, moderate quickness on a rower. You will see your heart rate go up very, very quickly. Okay, and you will see, even if you're doing timed 2000s or timed 1000 meter repeats, something like that. These are types of workouts that can really slaughter you, and to the point where I've been diehard on rowing, but tend to then develop some type of really severe stress in my bicep and in my elbow on both arms. Okay, even where my lower back, my lats will get sore. One thing I love about rowing is actually the little force mobility when you bring your seat in to where your feet are. But honestly, I think rowing, because you get your heart rate elevated so quickly, and from the actual usage, especially if we're not skilled in rowing, I tend to see that rowing actually has a pretty negative impact on building muscle mass, because I personally, along with other athletes that we've had, have seen it then have a negative impact on pull-ups, on rows, on heavy rows, on deadlifts, on benches. And in turn, it can, over a long period of time, have a negative impact on resistance-based training, which is building muscle. That's what we want to focus on. So I would label that between a C plus and a B minus on the tier list. Okay. So C plus, B minus is where I would put rowing. I think if you do it every 2 weeks at a slow intensity, that's perfectly fine. Just be aware of how it impacts you afterwards. And because your heart rate does go up so much, it can be very, very fatiguing. Now, the 100%, if we look at endurance riding and easy assault bike work as A tier, when I'm looking at S tier, okay, I'm thinking about 2 specific types of exercises. The first one we mentioned right off the bat. The second one we haven't even talked about yet. The first one that I absolutely love is just going out for a walk. Okay, wake up first thing in the morning, go for a walk. 30 minutes. Try to keep a little bit quicker pace than if you were out just meandering, just a little bit faster pace. Okay, walking is literally, in my opinion, one of the best ways to just elevate the heart rate a little bit, to get a little bit more of the caloric burn that we're talking about, and to get things even in your mind working a little bit more. I think that one of the best and most underutilized aspects of cardiorespiratory training is the mental aspect, the cyclical rhythmic aspect, and also the fact that you're geographically moving in a location means people can't talk to you, people can't bother you as much. You can really start to develop specific mental skills while you're doing walking, while you're doing running, and that's why I do like walking at a brisk pace. Okay, set times, 30 to 60 minutes, go out for a walk 2 to 3 days a week is absolutely amazing. It's 100% S tier. Now, the second S tier that I have not mentioned at all. Okay, this is something that we've used with professional wrestlers, some of the best in the world. We're thinking about ways to increase someone's muscle mass, okay, but also improve their overall endurance. We want to get them to be able to handle some type of tempo, but we want it to be done in a cyclical manner that doesn't bang up their joints. This is where the elliptical comes in. Okay, so if I'm sitting there and I'm looking at S tier and I'm going walking is 1 S tier, getting on the elliptical is the second S tier. The only part I don't really like about the elliptical is that it can be challenging to get somebody's heart rate relatively high, but that's also why it's so good. And the other thing is it's easily accessible to almost everywhere in the world now has ellipticals in their commercial gyms. Okay, so you can get on an elliptical and you can say, okay, 40 minutes at this pace, if I can get my heart rate to 135, 140, I'm going to be good. It's actually sort of hard to get your heart rate up on ellipticals that high. Okay, so I do like ellipticals quite a bit. I think you can be on them for 30 to 60 minutes. It can get a little bit boring, but if you're looking for increasing total blood volume and mitochondrial density and efficiency, you're going to see that from ellipticals. They can get mind-numbing over time, but if you're listening to Garage Strength's YouTube channel and you've liked, subscribed, and ring the notification bell, it's going to help you improve that timeline a little bit more. So when we're looking at these, and we're looking at that S tier, walking and elliptical would be S tier. When I'm looking at endurance forms that are best for increasing muscle mass, okay, best for managing the improvement in the increase of size of muscle, A tier would be easy assault bike and easy endurance riding. Okay, B tier would be swimming if you have a past history of swimming, and then some type of hill sprints as long as we monitor the increase in the intensity of the hill sprints. C tier would be jogging, ski erg, and hiking. And then D tier would be where we would put in those Metcons. Okay, when we put in the Metcons, I like them down at D tier just because they can have a negative impact on the other strength lifts that you tend to be doing. Even if we're looking at someone like Matt Frazier, I remember as a recap, Frazier talked about for like 2 to 3 years, he did an hour and a half row every single morning for a very, very long clip. Okay, hour and a half, 2 hours, and keeping his heart rate elevated so that he was doing that LSD work, increasing his total blood volume. And that didn't beat him up, but he's a skilled rower. So that's one thing I did want to bring up. Now, if I'm going to set up the day and I want to go in and actually do some type of endurance training, okay, typically this is how I recommend doing this. I want to set up the day so that I don't have a negative impact on my work in the gym, okay? At least I want to be aware of that. So typically what I'll do is that if let's say on a Sunday, I want to go in and I want to go out and run 6 miles. Okay, that's a decent clip. So we want to do some type of endurance work, let's say on day 1 or day 3, something like that. But let's say day 1, I want to do some endurance work. Okay, first thing in the morning before the kids wake up, I've got 4 children, we'll go out, I'll get my endurance work done. Okay, later on in the day, okay, so let's say about 6 hours later, I will do hypertrophy work with my legs. I've found that it hasn't had that negative of an impact as long as I'm doing hypertrophy work and not strength work. Okay. Now, that would be how I would set up one day. The other thing I would do is I would say, let's say that's Monday. I do easy endurance work in the morning and leg hypertrophy work. Then on Tuesday, I do some type of upper body work. Let's say on Wednesday, I do elliptical work, or I could go swimming, something like that. Easy again. Okay. Then on Thursday, I'm going to do some type of strength leg work. Okay. So I want to push the weight in the weight room. I'm going to do like heavier deads or heavier squats. And I want to see if the cardio from Wednesday had a negative impact. If it did, then I'm moving that, and I'm going to move that cardio to Friday. Because on Thursday, I'm going to do the strength workout for my legs, and then I'll do cardio in the morning on Friday, and then hypertrophy work for my upper body on Friday. Okay. And then that leaves Saturday and Sunday to theoretically add another day of endurance work. You can go for a run. You can do, this is when you could test that one Metcon a month. You could do your rower. You could go for a walk, anything along those lines. But typically, if we're doing a Lulu split and I have it 4 days a week and I'm lifting legs on Monday, I might do leg hypertrophy on Monday in the afternoon, but in the morning, 6 hours prior, I'm going to do some type of long, slow distance work. Okay, the assault bike for 60 minutes at a very slow clip. Make sure you eat enough protein post-workout. Tuesday, upper body work. Okay, Wednesday, we do the experiment. Are we going to, if we do swimming or if we do rowing, something like that, something relatively easy on Wednesday. Then Thursday, that's our next leg day. That will be, we want to push the weight on that Thursday. If we see it has a negative impact, then we take that Wednesday cardio and we move it to Saturday and Friday. Friday, we do hypertrophy upper body work, okay, and we do some other in the morning, some type of endurance work, okay. Then that gives us that Sunday off and Wednesday off, depending upon how we set up the schedule. It's not as challenging as it seems, as long as we have the timeline, 30 to 60 minutes in the morning, 30 to 60 minutes in the weight room on the days that we're doing a double session, okay. So you're still only training for about an hour to an hour and a half, okay. And if you wake up early enough, you can get your mind moving. You start to feel really good. I like to personally go for a run in the morning. And when I get back, I'll take my creatine. I'll make sure that I'm getting about 50 grams of protein in. And then I go throughout the day and I make sure that I'm eating enough so that when I go lift, I have good energy when I'm going to work out. Okay, so this is how we set up the entire week. Those are the tiers that I like to think through. Walking and elliptical would be that top tier. I do really like the assault bike. Higher intensity work like hill sprints are very, very phenomenal for endurance work, but make sure that you ease into it. Something like swimming tends to be more skill based. If you have that skill, you'll be perfectly fine. If you don't have that skill, you can shy away from swimming. And then we can get into the jogging, the ski, or the hiking, Metcons 1 to 3 times a month, depending upon the intensity that you have. So that's how we set up the entire week. That's how we go through this. And then make sure you have to be lifting 4 days a week. Right? You've got to be training 4 days a week. You've got to be getting in the weight room 4 days a week. You got to be providing a large enough of a stimulus of mechanical tension so that your body's adapting. You got to make sure you're eating enough protein. And then over time, your cardiorespiratory fitness elevates. Okay. And on top of that, your muscle mass starts to elevate. And that's how you can form cardio without hurting your muscular gains. If you need help with your program, click on the link down below. Head over to peakstrength.app. Make sure that you select that you want to improve that athletic fitness. You want to select that elite portion. That's going to help you then select what type of cardio you like to do. And it's going to build the week for you so that you can increase your fitness and increase your muscle mass. Because remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.